So powerful. Like I really love that mindset and that reframe of you get to start over, because then it just shifts the energy as opposed to feeling stuck and like, yeah, sure, you might not have wanted where you're currently at. You might not like this is not what you wanted, but then it's that fighting with reality that keeps us stuck. And so I really love like that, you're getting to start over. You're getting a do-over. Like how incredible to like take the knowledge you have, bring it forward and like make the best of it. Maybe you can explain a little bit like that gift framework.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, oh God, I'm going blank. It's funny thing about podcasting is you can have something in your mind and you're like, it's not coming out of my mouth. So the gift, it came from this idea that the do-over is a gift. You get something out of it and and I said in the TED Talk, like it might feel like a gift that's like a burning pile of shit on your doorstep, but it can be a gift. And it's actually an acronym, and the G stands for grieve. And a lot of times we have to take those moments. Not a lot of times. I think we always do. And a lot of times we skip over this part. But grieving the loss, whether that is, the job that you lost or the relationship you thought you were going to have, or, maybe you were an athlete and you're injured and that dream that you had of the future isn't going to pan out. But that taking that time to actually grieve, I think it's very, very important. And then I is insights. So the insights are, like I said earlier, the lessons. What did you glean from that? What did you learn? What can you learn, or what is there for you? My ex-husband had an affair, and I'm open with that, and I've shared it on my podcast. And there was a lot of just one grief for sure of what my relationship was, what I thought it was going to be, who I was as a person, as a single person. But then it's like, what can I learn? I could have sat there and been the victim, like, okay, well, he did this, he's a cheater, he's an asshole, and there's nothing for me to learn. That's his problem. Or I could look at it and say, how are ways that I was showing up that maybe weren't safe for him? Or how are ways that I can learn to spot red flags earlier, or any number of things. So getting whatever lessons you can. It's not to say you're saying anything is your fault, but what can you learn to help yourself in any future scenario? And then F is forgiveness. And, let's say in the situation that I just mentioned, of course, being able to forgive my ex, that could be something. But I think what's even more important is learning to forgive yourself, forgiving yourself for what you didn't know, forgiving yourself for not having maybe the tools or the resources or just any amount of things. I think we tend to put a lot of blame on ourselves for things, for maybe not knowing, or maybe we didn't interview the right way, so that's why we didn't get the job. So forgiveness is super important. And then the last one, I said truth in the talk, but I actually have often shifted this to trust. So I'm going to say both. Truth is that, as humans, we really catastrophize things. It's like, I know I did. When I found out my husband was having an affair, I was like, I'm going to be single the rest of my life and no one's ever going to love me. And I must be a trashy human. And I made up a whole lot of stories, but the truth was he made a choice that had nothing to do with me. And I had the choice of what to do after that. Just because of his choice doesn't mean that I was unlovable or I couldn't be in a relationship, right? So we have to be like, tell the truth as it is, but not worse than it is. But I also like to use trust here, because trust really implies, to me, like a surrender to the universe and to the process, and to have trust that you are on the right path, that things can and will work out however that looks, and that you also trust yourself to make the next right step and the next best decision for you. So while in my talk I said truth, a lot of the talks I've done since then, I've been saying trust instead. And I feel like they're both so good. So I'm going to just share them both.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Like, I actually really enjoy this framework. I think it's so like, it's like that flashlight of like when you feel like you're in the dark, it's just like you're in this season and it's like, okay, I need to allow myself to grieve. And like you said, so many of us skip over it. And the story you shared in your TED Talk was, you weren't allowed to grieve, like the process of giving your daughter up for adoption. And so like we do as a society not allow people to grieve a lot of things, right? And we don't talk about endings, and it's just like look the other way and just And so I think that that's so important to just allow yourself to be in that. And then you shared about how, the process you had to take yourself through to go through actually having that release.
Yeah, I think I'm so glad you brought it up. It's one of the things when I was doing a lot of research on starting over, and I was doing a lot of research on just, processing different things like divorces and deaths and all of that, that grief isn't always it's not always talked about, except just in its own framework on death. We talk about grief and death, and it seems like it's okay. But even in yeah, and even in death, it seems like there's a timeline on it. Like you're supposed to be done grieving at a year, or you're supposed to be done grieving after 6 months, or like there's like a timeline somewhere in the back of your mind. And I don't know where it comes from, because I just went through the death of my mother, and it was interesting because right after I felt okay, but around 5, 6 months, I was struggling and I was beating myself up going, you should be fine by now. And then I'm talking to my counselor and she's like, why would you be fine by now? It's only been 6 months. And I found some people sharing online how they say, give yourself 5 years. And I go, that actually feels more realistic. 5 years feels realistic to go through that. And then I did a podcast episode on grief, and, my partner, Jill Coleman, she said, when do you get over it? And I said, to be honest, there are things I don't think you ever get over. I think you lose a child, you're not going to get over that ever. There's some things it's like your day-to-day grief might look different. You're getting through the day and you have joy again, but sometimes you will grieve for a lifetime. But I think it's okay to recognize that and to share it and to understand that grief doesn't always just look like crying in your bedroom. It's so many feelings and so many emotions. Anger is a big part of grief. And it's not even like the anger of being mad at something. It's almost like the unfairness and injustice of something, right? Like this wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to be doing this other thing. And so this injustice is a big part of grief. And I think it's really important to feel that and to express it and to talk to someone so that you can get it out and then you can kind of let it go. But when you hold it in, it's still festering there. I'm really of the mindset that if we don't process emotions, they don't go away. No. It's just like like a boil that you cover with a Band-Aid, and it's still under there. If you rip the Band-Aid off and you peel the skin, that thing's going to explode, and it's only a matter of time. And it's like, it might explode on your future partner when they say the wrong thing and trigger you. It might explode in some ways you don't want it to, or it might explode by showing up as disease or illness in your body. And I think that happens too. And I really think that unexpressed grief is a cause of a lot of our actual physical illnesses and mental illness.
So interesting. I actually believe the same thing. I do believe that there's only the high vibes only, positive vibes only, right? We just try to focus on those. And the reality is we're a human. We have both. We have lower vibration and higher vibration. And when you're going through something, allowing that process to just grieve it in any capacity you need to. Maybe you want to sleep more, like you said, the anger, and having the capacity to resource yourself with the tools you need, right? Like the supports. And I think that's so powerful, because then that's the only way I believe that you can get to your second part, which is the insights. Otherwise, it's just you stay stuck and you harden and man, you calcify, and then what? You never open back up. You put these walls up,
And it's so hard to find the insights in the lesson when you're still stuck in the anger, or you're still stuck in kind of where that is. You couldn't... When I first found out about my ex's affair, and I was so angry and so blindsided and so hurt and everything, there's no way you could have told me, you're going to get lessons out of this, sweetie. Why don't you look for the positives, or look for F you. Yeah. There's no way you don't say that. But because I was able to, and I really am proud of myself looking back, how I grieved that and how I worked through it. And I cried, and I had talks with my friends, and I went to the beach, and I punched pillows, and I did all the things, and I let it out. And then once that energy is released, I was like, okay, what is left here? What is the truth about all this? What can I take out of this? And and who do I want to be going forward? I had to make some conscious choices. I don't want to be the bitter person who thinks every man cheats and I don't trust anyone. I didn't want to be that, but I had to consciously choose that because it's very easy to be like, fuck dudes, all they do is want to hook up with everyone, you know, like you can easily go that route. And it's like no judgment to someone who does, but that's somebody who hasn't allowed themselves to processing.
Yeah. They haven't worked through their stuff. And you said, just like the way you said, like a boil with a Band-Aid on top, it's like, I think a lot of us are holding so many wounds and like you just rub up against them the wrong way. And it's like, ow, but that wound is for you to heal. Like you need to go and heal that wound.